这样的，我们这边还没有正式
Before the actual
这个信
class,
息之前，有
I
两个事情说一下。
think I want to make a few announcements
第
beforehand.
一个事情呢，
The first one,
我这边学校这边需要
first off, is
几个发信老师啊，
that I am hiring for my wisdom and compassion school.
当然你很好
That
的
is
去考
the
虑。
primary school. I need one Chinese teacher and one English teacher.
教英语
So
教汉语，还要教
I
音乐。
hope you could really consider your situation and then you
然
can
后如果你们
apply
有
for this
有发
position.
信的话呢，当
I
我
have 2 positions
下完
available.
课的时候到那个
And if you're interested,
咖啡厅，
then after this class, you can go to the
简单
cafe
的面试。
on the first floor, and then you can take a simple
太突然了吧。
interview. It's rather sudden, isn't it?
这样的，然后，确实我们那里的好多人举手是吧？
Many people raise their hands. That's good.
教育比较落后啊，就是所以，尤其是现
In
在
my area, I think education is rather quite not advanced, I have to say. Especially, I think the subject of English, if the children do not study since a young age, then I think they'll fall behind. They'll lag behind in the society.
这一点呢，如果有老师
So
发现的话
for
那也特别感
people
谢。
over here,
当然
if
这
you
个
have such
要求的
aspiration
时
to
间呢，
teach
可能要
in the
支
school,
教
then that would
2年
be
左右。
really
最好是有这
appreciated.
个
There's a
学时长
required
的，就是
there's a
有这个教师
required
资格
timeline for you to then
还有
teach
呢
in this
当然
position
这
that
个
is 2 years.
有
The
这个
best is that for those of you who've already then graduated from teachers
发
college
现的这种意
and
乐啊，就这样的。
who have great enthusiastic in teaching and love children, then I think that's really the best.
有这么几个
So,
这样的话，当
in
然
fact, we have 3 positions. That's
看看有
music,
没有人
English, and
这
a
个发现
Chinese
或者说
subject.
是如果有报名的话呢，我们网上也有
Or
一
if
些
you
线
want
到时候
to
看一下。
apply,
这是
but
第一
you're
个
not
事情。
here today, then you can apply
然后第二
online.
个
We
事
have
情呢，
the online
我这
application
今年
available as well.
在我那个
The
学校
second
附
is
近呢做了一个图书馆，
I
然后
also then built a library near the schools that I funded. That is then a library to collect books that's valuable, that's really important,
当然是这样。
and the languages including English, Tibetan, and Chinese, but not limited to that. I hope that if those of you who have books available and want to donate, we're very welcome. But please donate the ones that you think is valuable, and don't donate to this library because you can deal with the books at your home. I will later on provide you an address where you could send to the library for a collection. In fact, I went to lots of European and American countries, and I noticed that in many of the private libraries, they collected many different art and different books in different languages and many precious books that no longer is in print. So I'm really looking for those kind of books to collect in this library. I really hope that if you have new books or really valuable old books that's out of print or valuable books, then you can donate to the address that later on I will provide. Another thing is that in Visar, in Kampa, in Amdo, in these 3 areas, 3 regions,
仪式就是衣服和那个饰品，就是装饰的话，那就是现在逐渐就是也有
there are
有
lots
些地
of
方呢，就是可能小
the
区
costumes,
有这种情况，
lots of the
所以我也
clothing as
收集
well
一
as
些
their
比较有价值的
as
这样
well
的
as
服装啊，
their
脏装或者是其他的
adornments are
这个
nowadays
呢
then
包括
lost
那里的
in
历史啊，就是这
the
个是一
in
个呢
the area.
比较
So
想
I'm
做的一件
also
事情，
collecting the
比如
costumes
说昂
as
度
well as
那
their
边的话呢，各
adornments,
个地方
such
有不
as
同的，虽
Amdol
然是藏族，
and
但是藏族
although we call that as Tibetan area, but in Tibetan area, there are many different kinds of attire as well as different kind of adornments. So if you have such kind of resources that you want to then collect or donate, then I'm also welcoming you to do that as part of the preservation of the culture project in Amdo, in Kham, in Visar area, in Kham area, in Litown, in Baotown, in the farm area and the herding area, people's dresses are very different. So I really want to collect some of those very traditional clothings that is with history to then also exhibit in the library and keep it as part of the culture preservation. I'll also provide some contact info. So for people who've kept some of those attire and who've kept some of those adornments and the traditional dresses, I'll be very grateful if you could donate and then exhibit in the library and kept in the library. In fact, this part of the culture is extremely important because without preserve such cultural aspect, then it will slowly disappear in the river of history. This is in fact quite taken seriously in the West. I'm not asking you to do lots of inappropriate things to collect this, and if you collect those objects, artifacts inappropriately, I won't accept it either. The third thing is about the schedule. Tomorrow we'll have the class on Padmasambhava's application. On Saturday, originally I said that I will give you a teaching, but I will give you a teaching on August 11th. Originally I said it's August 10th, which is Saturday, but I'll give you the teaching instead on August the 11th, that is Sunday, because in fact something else came up I had to attend. I am very sorry about changing the schedule. Maybe you'll feel upset about me, then you should raise it in front of my face and not behind my back. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sure that you'll be fine. Okay, so let's get back into our actual class, that is the 7 points of mind training. In our previous class, we've already talked about the preliminary practice, the changing adversity into the path of enlightenment, applying the practice throughout the whole life, and the measure of mind training. Of course, how can you measure the proficiency of your practice? And when we talk about proficiency, it's not that you've already attained enlightenment. So the masters have already stated that the last 4 aspects that we've already talked about that are the measurements of proficiency of practice, such as have the single purpose of benefiting others, and then rely upon yourself as the principal one to have the witness, and then have the only joyful attitude, and practice even during distraction. So we should continuously to strive to practice in such a way. And we'll continue from last class. Today the content would be probably a little bit more than usual. And if you have pens and instruments to write, then you should take notes. I think people over here are a little bit different than the ones who are attending, who usually attend classes in the Shrine Hall, because the ones who usually attend the classes, they have the pressure of giving presentation afterwards. But the lay practitioners, when they first get here, they get really excited, but later on they completely forgot about what to do in the class. So I really encourage you to take notes from the class. I'll give you the oral transmission, isn't it?
今天又来了一个，今天我不会弄这个，他们故意给我。
I have another one today, but I'm not going to sculpt.
Along la mumcho, Jogji say Marto, Stolo, Mofia, have the Mogo, Titi, Yan, the Digmansur, Dumba, Lojung, Flafia, Tambana, Lojung, Manium Jam, Perrin, Jerry, Taverday, Namjur, Tamsil Chica, Sha, Logno Tamsil Chica, Sha, Tomtang, Ni Lab Shava, Ni, Nibok, the Ganshung, Jupiter, Sha, Nibok, Jordan, Dula. Trong Kawak some la flapper share, Giyuk so now some long, Nyamba mepa now some gum, Garmid of some down dumber share, Yerlap Chumer Tata share the captain Tam Jung, Gunlak Chi, Gora Namla Tata Gummer, Tianjan Tagla, Stumer share, Tarik so Nyams of long, Golok Mercia, Range of Mercia, Tor Shurt of Jean, Takshida Niki, Tarver share, Yi Malcolm, Golon Mardom, Yetsum Mercia. Gorchi mando the Nigmar nga wo dovander, Shancheva Lambda, Gervai, Mang of the Nyambo, the Serlon Bani, Jebai, Shmonjan, Legim Joseph, Rungamuba, Mombo, G. Dunger, Tamgan Chad, Satin Ne, Danzan, Dervir, Damga, G. Danishan, Manjoto, Jon, the Jet, Tomatio, Lojon, Lojon, Druma, Lojon, Don Sir, Serb, Drumer, Namji Savai. Yeah, no, love should come to. 下面我们讲
Now let's continue with the 7 points of mind training. And now we are on the 6th point. So that is the vows of taking engaging in the practice, which then include about 16 points. The first point then talks about train constantly in 3 basic principles. In fact, each one of them then is considered as a different point. So it talks about the Mahayana practitioners, they should study in the 3 basic principles. The first one is keep the 2 vows. The vow that you've taken, the vow such as the Pratimoksha vow, your Mahayana or Bodhisattva vow, or your Samaya vow. Once you've taken such a vow, do not then abandon it. The second one says refrain from the outrageous action. Mahayana practitioners should not be the ones who do not have any right view. They should not then drink and then destroy grass and trees and conduct in the way that is crazy, insane, and different than than normal people. Nowadays, there are people who claim themselves to be their yogins, and they are enlightened masters, and then carry out their action in a way that is rather quite outrageous. But Mahayana practitioners should not engage in such kind of crazy and insane conducts, actions. The second one says that to change your attitude but remain natural, basically keep a rather a sense of equanimity in terms of their actions. Do not then behave in the way that you only be nice to people but not to the animals, or accept criticism from your family but not from people who do not really know you, and so on. Such kind of actions is inappropriate for Mahayana practitioners. Develop a sense of equanimity towards all of them is quite an important action to the Mahayana practitioners. You should then be rather equanimity, have a sense of equanimity in terms of your own action as well. The next one says that change your attitude but remain natural. We have to change our previous actions that is very selfish. If you were a self-centered person, then at least from today onwards, you should place all the other sentient beings as a priority. So that is change your attitude. And then also remain natural, remain a sense of steadfast. During your mundane activities, you should not boast about your own good qualities to others. You should then maintain such a good quality inside yourself, inside your own mind. In the group that you're in, any kind of community that you're in, you should be rather quite natural, quite peaceful, quite steadfast, instead of promoting yourself. Nowadays, people are so used to promotions, advertise themselves. In fact, it is then written in some Vinaya text that if you are doing such propagation for the benefit of others, then there are some exceptions. But for a lot of us, if you have a sense of, if you have a tendency of promoting yourself, I think it is the most important to then correct such a habit. We have this habitual pattern of being have lots of self-cherishing attitude as well as self-centeredness, but that is the habitual pattern that we should then correct in our mind stream. The next one, it talks about don't speak of injury, don't speak of injured limbs. You should not criticize or harm others when they're already having some kind of defects. For example, if they're mute, if they're deaf, then you should not bring it up to them and hurt them more. Or if the other person is too short or too tall, and so on. And then so that was from the physical aspect. If the person lacks a certain merits in their mentality, in the mind aspect, such as if the other person had broken their vow and so on, or in such a way, if you were to point it out in front of that person, it would be quite harmful. To point out other people's mistakes or misconduct in front of the whole crowd is in fact not beneficial. Do not do so, because you're not a Buddha-like person. Then how could you point fingers at the others as if they are all demons? If you were to perceive yourself as the only good person in the whole crowd of demons, how can that be? If your mind perceives everyone as evil, then what does that say about your own mind? Then the next point says, don't ponder others' flaws. So don't always contemplate about other people's flaws. Do not always point fingers to the other person's not doing a good job and that person's not doing a good job. We often say that there is a tick on the other person's face and you see it very clearly, but there's a gigantic yak that's sitting on your face, but you see nothing about it. Just like that, we usually see a little bit of mistake that was done by others, but we don't see our own big flaws at all. We're so very blinded about our own flaw. The next one says, train first with the strongest destructive emotion. So what does that mean? It means that each and every one of us have very different habitual tendencies. Maybe you have very strong desire. Maybe the other person have a very strong anger and aggression. And the other person has great jealousy. And that person is really stupid and have lots of ignorance in the habitual pattern. In such kind of destructive emotions, the most destructive emotions that you have, then you should observe it, and then all of your energy should go to work with that particular destructive emotions first. There are lots of teachings that's included in the sutras and shastras talking about how to work with the desire. In Bodhisattva Charyavatara, in different chapters, it talks about different ways of working with different destructive emotions or afflictions, such as if you have lots of anger issue, then you should particularly read into the patient chapter and so on. And if you have lots of jealousy and you have this kind of lots of arrogance, and there are people who probably feel that I have all the 5 strong poisons. In my mind consciousness, the 5 poisons is flooding in my mind, and I cannot deal with it. Anyhow, you should then observe the most destructive emotion first and then work with that one first. The 6th one talks about abandon any expectations of result. The expectation of the fruition of fame, of wealth, of health, of happiness. In fact, in Mahayana, we talk about if all your pursuits are only for yourself, then that pursuit is the wrong pursuit. Because if you were to only long for personal liberation, that is not praised in the Mahayana path. Even if you have health, even if you have fame, even if you have happiness, even if you have wealth, if you only want all of those pleasant things for yourself, if you only want all of those selfish attainment for yourself, this is not recognized, not praised in Mahayana. So what you should long for or aim for is benefit for others, for all sentient beings. The next one talks about give up a poisonous food. So poisonous food, you cannot digest it, or sometimes the poisonous food would threaten your life. It could be vital. In Mahayana path, what is the most poisonous food in Mahayana's path then? That is selfishness. Just as there's a poison called the Zahara, once you eat that kind of poison, then everything, all the organ in your body will start to rot. So similar to that poison, selfishness, self-centeredness is the poison of Mahayana practitioner, of Mahayana path. Just as the Prajnaparamita Sutra said, this kind of mentality is just like poisonous food. Therefore, we should then stop consuming such kind of poisonous food. Of course, for us mundane beings, it is very difficult for us of not having any kind of selfishness, but at least in the mundane path, in the path of mundane beings, or at the stage of mundane beings, we still have selfishness, and that is the residue of habitual pattern. But at least by practicing in the Mahayana path, then slowly this kind of self-centeredness will diminish with time. It is not that only after 1 or 2 classes you started to get rid of selfishness. That is not true. That cannot happen overnight. The 8th one talks about don't be so loyal to the cause. Don't be blindly loyal. We usually talk about protect the relatives and friends, but kill the enemies. In the mundane world, yes, we follow certain kind of rules. That is, then be nice to your relatives, and you should then get even with. You should get even with your enemies. I saw 2 young novices at that time who were fighting, and I used this mala to hit them. And that time, the young monk said that I don't want to fight with you today, but because Khenpo. I don't want to fight with you because Khenpo is here today, but I remember this, and I will take my revenge after 10 days, after 10 years. Recently, there's something in China that happened just like that. A young child whose mother died in front of him, and his mother was killed brutally by 3 neighbors. At that time, the child was only 13 years old, and after 22 years, back in 2018, he then took revenge to the 3 neighbors and killed them all. The lawyer of this young boy, he tried to make the case by saying that the young child was never really consulted and was never really had any kind of comfort at that time. So it left the kind of some kind of deep impact on him. But anyhow, he was then sentenced to death. In some of the areas, in some of the ethnics, I think lots of people still have the kind of tendency of taking revenge. You should then remember people's kindness to you, but not the bad dealings towards you. This is taught in Dizigui as well, the conduct of students and children. In fact, we should not be so predictable to the mundane rules, to the social mundanes. We should then break such kind of mundane of retaliate to the people who've done wrong to us. The next one says that don't lash out do not then lash out in retaliation. Doesn't matter how angry you are, do not speak out really coarse language. Some of the languages are really coarse and very difficult to hear. In front of a group of people, when you are speaking something really coarse and really harmful, then it shows that your mind, your personality is rather very rude. So you should try to speak rather very gentle language, gentle words. Lala Chögyam Rinpoche, he then presented lots of the downfalls of using coarse language. The 10th one talks about don't lie in ambush, don't wait in ambush. When you were hurt when you get hurt from others, maybe at the moment you don't really have the opportunity to retaliate the other. But when you find a good opportunity, then you retaliate. That is not appropriate. There are people who would then wait for people to get into a rather very difficult situation, and then they'll strike. At first, some people may appear to be very nice and very gentle and really obedient to you, but afterwards, when that person finds a good opportunity to retaliate, then they'll retaliate really hard. Just as during Cultural Revolution, there are people nowadays who, there are people at that time who then remembered how the other person was doing something wrong to them, and then during Cultural Revolution, and then they would find the opportunities to retaliate and to hurt the other person the most at their weakest moment. In fact, this is not done by Mahayana practitioners. For a genuine practitioner, what they should really do is to help them out when they needed the help the most, when they are at the weakest moment in their life. The next one then says that don't strike a vulnerable point. Do not purposely strike a vulnerable point, either with words or action. Do not use your words to strike at a vulnerable point. Do not use such sharp words to do so. Or do not use the kind of really harsh mantras, the harmful mantras to harm the non-humans. We should use kindness, we should use happiness to then treat everyone. Do not take advantage of your eloquence or articulate speech to sharply hurt other people. In fact, in this era, many people have this really fragile heart. And once you just say something very, once you say something that could or may sound really harmful to the other person sometimes would take the unexpected extreme measures, such as committing suicide. Therefore, we should be very considerate to the other person and speak of the gentle words to them. Sometimes, however, there are the cases where we should use a very special language, or we should use a special skillful means by using really strong words to help the other person, or to then protect yourself. And nowadays, it's just like that. If you don't do so, you're not able to protect yourself. Today we have more content than usual, but I think it should be okay, because there are people who can teach for 4 hours straight, and I'm not going to be that elaborate.
下面就是讲这个就是偏窄摸一牛啊，就是它这里这个偏牛，它那个所在的这种物件的话呢，不要这个移到这个黄牛上。好像有些译本当中的话呢，这个偏牛啊，就是它的这种这个所托付的这种这个心理呢，就是不要这个移动到母牛上、奶牛上，就是有这样的译本，但这种说法可能是不对的啊。就是这个偏牛的话呢，就是我们这个一般也有公牛也有母牛， 就主要是用于那个耕耘啊，就你们可能知道，它牛角都是就这样的那种，然后呢，就身体也是比较纤长的，然后尾巴也是长长的，就是那种，那黄牛和其他牦牛的话，那就是它的整个身体的形状啊，就是这些都是不同的，而且不能直接耕耘，耕耘的话。
But for ox and other kind of
这里一般在这个墓里面的话
cattle, then they don't really
叫
carry,
牛啊，就是
they cannot really carry
它
such a
的价
burden.
值也是很高的。那么这样意思就是说呢，就是
So
这
the
个田牛
the farmer's
在的
cattle,
这
in
种
fact, it
它
has a lots.
所做的这些
It has
它自己
more
的做的
value than
没
the
有必要呢
others.
就是赚到这
So
个别
what
的
it
这
says
个
here is
如果
that
别的如果
the
转移到别的牛身上的话
responsibility
呢，它
of
也
the
不一定
farmer's
而且
cattle
也
should
没有
not be
所以
transferred
我们
to
做
the
任何
cow.
事情
So
的话
your
呢，
own
自己呢就是负
responsibility
责
should
什么
not
的话
be
呢，就自己
dumped
养
to
好了自己
others.
承担，
Whatever
就
you
没有
should
必要
do,
呢
then you
就
should
是
carry such
一直推
responsibility
到这个别
and
人
do
身上。
not
我们有些人呢
dump
做
all
事情
your
的过程当中，
responsibilities
人
to
也是
others.
成功
There
的
are
话呢，
people
这是我做
nowadays,
的，这是我做的，然后好像这件事情是不太
they
成功的时候，
would
这不是我做的，
then
应该是他做的，
take
他做
up
的。
the credits
现在我
when
们
the
这里
things
的
are
人让我
done
签
well,
字时，让
and
我签
then
字的
they
话呢，
would
我也知道是他们是
get
什么
rid
样的，
of
就
the
是
kind of
就主要是让我跟以
responsibilities
前
when
过啊，
it
是
is
这样。
not
就
really
因
good.
为这个现在很多人
Sometimes
是比
when
较
people
聪
ask
明
me
的，
to
明哲保身的，
sign,
然后一旦
I
就是遇到什么
have
的
this
话呢，
inner
包括
voice
我
in
们现在
myself
时间
and
当中的一
thinking,
些
is
这
he
个领
trying
导啊，
to
就是这样的
dump
话呢，
his
很多事
burden
情都
to
推
me
推
and
这个
is it
这个
something
不
that
愿
is
意
not
自己承
beneficial?
担，
Maybe
稍微
that's
有一
why.
点贡献的
So
话，那
nowadays,
这
I
是我
think
做
this
的，
is a
我做的。
tendency
但
of
是
lots of
他不
people.
是他的话呢，就是也
They
是
would
我
then
已经
take the
参与到这
credit
里，
when things
稍微
are
有一点这
successful,
件事情
and
是有
when
一
there's
点
a failure,
就比较
then they
关
would
注啊，或
just
者这样
try
哦，
to
这个
dump
跟我
all
没什
their
么关系，应该是他
responsibilities
吧，
to
应该不是
others.
我
It
这样
must be
的，
him and not
是吧？
me.
所
I've
以
never done
一般
that.
来讲呢，就是自
There are
己
many different
该
kinds
承担
of
的，应该有担
situations
当，
like
应该有
such.
有
So
承受
whenever
啊，
it
就是
is
不
your
应该
turn
呢
to
就是
take the
推到别
responsibility,
人
then
身
you
上，
should
这样的话
take
呢，
such
这样的推
responsibility.
卸责任
Don't
的行为呢，
then
就
dump
实际上
the
不合
responsibility
理，
to
达成
others.
果子的话呢，就是
Such
自
kind
己
of
应该
action
有
is
担当，应该
quite
有自己有
inappropriate
这种
because as a
信仰
Mahayana
啊，就
practitioner,
是
you should have
我们不是
the
要这个带终身的服务啊，然
responsibility
后
and
自
such
己的这种
strength
应
to
该
carry
带
the
自己承
to
担
carry
的
the
这种
burden
重
for
任，如
all
果你没
sentient
有这
beings,
个
carry the
去这个
responsibility
承
of
受的话呢，
liberating
那
all
也是不
sentient
合理的。
beings.
这是第12个的，然后第13个的话
That's the
呢，
12th one. And the 13th
啊，
point,
就
it says
是
that don't
不好
be
抢就
competitive.
真相啊，就是他这里跟好像对，应该可以吧，就是就像我们实践当中的话，赛马啊，
Just
这样的话
as
呢，就是有比赛的，
in
就一直
just as
在
nowadays
这
we
个
have
比
horse
赛的过程
racing,
当中呢，就是大
and
家都
during
会
such race,
这个争强好胜啊，就是就
people
争
get
强
very
夺夺的
competitive.
去争啊，去讲啊，去斗啊，就是这样
Everyone
的。
will
实际上呢，我们实
try
践
to
当中的有些
win the
名
medal.
声也好，地位
In
也好，
fact,
财富也好，那么
in
这些呢
our
就是不
world,
应该
when
就是特
facing
别
fame,
的
wealth,
去这个抢啊，就
you
去
should
特别的
not
去
be so
去竞
competitive
争吧，
towards
就是这样呢
that.
也是不合理。本来是我们人
This
呢
is
需要
not
有一种竞争
reasonable.
性啊，就是
In
从
some
这个
ways,
正
yes,
当
we
的
need to
竞
be
争来讲
competitive.
是佛教也是不会
Good
不会
competitive
否认的。但
is
是呢，我们就是为了
then
一
not
些
denied by
就是
Buddhism.
自利
But we
利
should
益
not
或者说是损害
be
他人这
competitive
样的一种
in the
心
way
态当
that
中
we
呢，就是
benefit
去这个
ourselves
争夺和去
but
去
harm
竞争呢，就
others.
没有多大的这个实
In
益。
such a way,
那
then
这
it
个
is
第
not
14
really
个呢，就是
beneficial.
端主住泄密
The
啊，就
14th
是
one
它
it
这个
says
泄
that
密当中
don't
的话呢，有这
misperform
个
the
泄见
rites.
端见
Where
端见
over
啊
here
端见
it talks
然后
about
也有秀信，
the
就是泄秀，就是泄密的这种秀信，还有泄信。
where it talks
这个
about
泄的
the
这种
wrong
行为啊。
view,
那
wrong
在生活当
action.
中呢，应该端出就是这些3种性
In
质为
our
主，
life, we
一切
should
是
then
表明为你要的
eradicate
这些
or
行为。那么
stop
第15
doing
个
all
呢，
of
就是
those
权谋
actions
不认
that
为
we
无果。
use
那
wrong
么
view
本来
and
是
wrong
天然
action
的，就如
to
果你去供养的
then
话呢，它赐予这个
serve
福
our
德。如果
livelihood.
你没有就
The
是
next
去
one
很好
it
的
says
医治的
that
话呢，它可能会变成魔来危害人。
don't reduce
那我
gods
们
to
的修行
demons.
正法呢也是这样的。如果我
What
们
it
如理
means
如法
that
的修
is
的话，
that
让我们
when
很多
there's
的
gods and and celestial beings, then you should then practice or make offering to them. But when you don't do it properly, they can be then turned into demons, just as Dharma. If we do not practice Dharma correctly, then Dharma may become a reason for us to then fall into the three realms. When Dharma is not merged in your mind, it is just as a celestial being is transformed into demon. Correct Dharma should bring happiness to you. But if you do not practice it properly and even have wrong view because of Dharma, then you will fall into three lower realms, just as you turned the God into demon. The next one says, don't seek others' misery as crutches of your own happiness. We should not build our happiness on top of other people's misery. We should not feel happy when our enemy is suffering, or when your provider is getting sick. Then you may feel that, oh, maybe I can get I can inherit his property and so on. Do not feel in such a way, because you should not build your happiness on top of other people's misery and misfortune. In fact, when other people are experiencing such misery and misfortune, you should try your best to help them. You should at least dedicate your merit and make aspiration to help them. So that was the 16 of them. It has then the first one, if we then separate it into 3, then it has 19. But if we don't, it comes together to 16 of them. So it talks about the commitments or the vows of mind training. These are the commitments that you should make. And the next one talks about the precepts of mind training. Sometimes we say that it's the commitment of Tantra and the precepts of Mahayana practice or of the Sutrayana practice. So over here it also talks about the previous one. The sixth one talks about the sixth one talks about a commitment and the precept, and seventh one talks about precepts. So after we finish learning the 22nd of this part, then we can take a break. The 22 lines inside the 7th point, and then we can take a rest. The first one talks about do everything with a single intention. So doing everything, such as your sleeping, eating, sitting, all of the actions, all of your daily activities, then should be taken with only one intention for the Mahayana practitioner. And that one intention is the mind of benefiting others. While you're eating, while you're walking, while you're where you are chatting with others, the only thing, the single intention should be focusing on benefiting other sentient beings. Your body, mind, speech should then be taken with this single intention. The next one says that counter all adversity with a single remedy. Whatever kind of adversity or obstacles, your enemy or some non-humans or bad emotions, afflictions, kleshas, whatever kind of natural disaster or obstacles made by others, and any of those situations, the only remedy is to benefit others.
When
To practice bodhicitta. When other people have done something that is very harmful to you and unreasonable, then you should practice generating bodhicitta. When other people is harming you, then you should contemplate in such a way that I must have done something that's been harmful to him before in the previous lives. Therefore, I'm feeling such harm. So I should practice the bodhicitta and wish him solely for his happiness, so that it may pacify our bad karma together. Next one says that 2 tasks is one at the beginning and one at the end. At the beginning is in the morning, then you should make the aspiration for bodhicitta, and then one at the end is before you go to bed. At that time, then you should contemplate, have I practiced in such a way during the day that I've practiced only according to benefiting others? Maybe at that time you feel that, wow, I've made perfect conduct today. I've benefited sentient beings solely for today. Therefore, I should praise myself and reward myself by going out for a good meal. So the 2 tasks that you should do is the bodhicitta, aspiring bodhicitta, and the conduct bodhicitta, the 2. The next one talks about whichever of the 2 occurs, be patient. When you feel, when you're ill, when other people slander you behind and harms your fame, have bad reputation, and whenever those kind of things happen, be patient. The obstacles as well as excitement, something really happy for you to happen. Then in both of the situations, you should be patient. When you're encountering good situations, such as you have good reputation and you have lots of wealth, again, lots of wealth, you have everything that you've ever wanted. And there are people say to me that I've got everything that I've ever wanted. And at that moment, do not be so excited. In fact, you should be patient. There are people who can be patient in obstacles, but not patient in excitement. In some dark period of time, some practitioners, they first had great endurance during the time of difficulty, but when everything got better, get free, and material providing get more abundant, and then the practitioners stopped being patient and they started getting too full of themselves. There are people who get too extreme when things are not going well. They in fact feel lots of suffering, and when things are going too well, then they get too excited. But we should contemplate in such a way that in fact everything is empty. Am I being too elaborate? That was the 4th one, right? The 5th one says that keep the 2 even at your life's expense. The 2 are the general vow, and the second one is the branch commitments. The vows such as the Pratimoksha vow and Bodhisattva vow and Samaya vow and 16 are the 6, and then the commitments are the 16 commitments that's included in the 6 points. And it says then the next one is train the three difficulties. What are the three difficulties? The first one is difficulty in recognize the affliction in the beginning. The second one is to dispel affliction in the middle, and third one is cut the continuity of afflictions at the end. So those are the most difficult ones to do, the three difficulties. And the third one says that acquire the three main provisions. What are the three then? The first one is to then work with a good teacher who gives you teachings on wisdom, compassion, and bodhicitta. Second one is to give rise, train your mind to have a devotion to compassionate bodhicitta. And the third one is to establish favorable conditions for practice, such as food and clothing and so on. Without all these three, then you won't be able to practice bodhicitta smoothly. Even if you have your mind with devotion and your place to stay and lots of the material provisions, but without a teacher, you won't be able to know the teaching, you won't be able to practice. And similarly, there are, if you have the previous two but not the favorable conditions or material providings, then you don't even have a place to stay to practice. Then how could you practice bodhicitta at all? So all three of them are extremely important. The eighth one talks about a cultivated three that must not decline. So first of all, you should always have admiration towards the guru. You should not have the kind of aversion and have wrong view towards your teacher. There was a disciple who got into a fight with his teacher, and he then stayed in a cave and practiced. And when he got into that cave and started practicing Guru Yoga, at that time, the guru who had a fight with him, then he felt that as such a guru, how can I practice Guru Yoga with him? And then he left the cave and not able to practice Guru Yoga and abide in the cave anymore. So that's the first one. Then you should have admiration. Second one is that you should not lose faith in Mahayana path, in bodhicitta. The third one talks about you should then keep your vows. The ninth one says, keep the three from which you must not separate. So the three are the body, mind, and speech. In terms of body, you should prostrate constantly and circumambulate and so on. In terms of your speech, then you should recite, you should chant mantras, you should constantly practice in such a way. And your mind, you should practice and train your mind to benefit others, to train your mind to practice in wisdom and compassion and bodhicitta. So speech, body, speech, and mind are the three that you must not separate from. The 10th one talks about apply the training impartially to all. The mind that is impartiality. Over here, impartiality talks about impartiality to the sentient beings as well as to this phenomena. How do you practice impartiality to the phenomena then? There are people nowadays who, after getting really angry, they don't really lash out their anger on others, but they would lash out their anger on the objects, such as a mug or then close the door really loudly to slap on the door and so on. In fact, I think lots of the actions are very much influenced by the media, by the movie. If people nowadays were to get into a fight with their parents or with their loved ones, they would then copy the actions that they watched from the movies, and they would lash out their anger onto those objects. Yes, there are times where you get angry, but what's the point of then lash out your anger on the objects? In fact, if you were to lash out your anger at all, the fruition of such, the karmic consequences is quite difficult to endure. You should not have any bias towards sentient beings, and you should not have any bias and partial idea towards the objects either. So what's the point of then lash out your anger on objects? They've never done anything wrong to you. I'm not sure about the West, but in the East, this is quite common. Whenever people started getting angry during a quarrel, they started lashing out their anger onto objects. I'm sure people get angry since we are all mundane beings, but when you're angry, but there is no use of lash out of your anger on objects on the phenomenal world. That is quite ignorant, isn't it? We should then treat all kinds of phenomena, all kinds of situations with impartiality. The 11th one talks about it is vital that it be deep and all-pervasive. You should not practice. You should practice impartiality to all sentient beings, but not only to one group and not to the other. In fact, you should have a sense of impartiality to all sentient beings, have a sense of impartiality to all phenomena. So I really hope that the Sangha, the practitioners, could adapt my advice of not lashing out of your anger onto external situation. You should have a sense of self-control. Do not get completely out of control. When you get out of control, then it could lead to quite dangerous results. In fact, whenever I give teachings to the jails, to the inmates, what their stories taught, what's the common situation of their stories are that, in fact, lots of the time they committed some kind of crime out of some anger, and at a certain moment they lost the control of themselves, and then they committed some kind of crime. I'm sure in hell realm that's what the most of the sentient beings are as well. Even for a good practitioner, what they perceive is that even the trees and the greeneries are chanting the Kilikilya mantra. The mountains and the rivers are all doing something virtuous. Similarly, for a bad practitioner, for someone who have rather tinted or diluted mind, they perceive all the external phenomena as evil. Maybe some of you feel that why is Khenpo targeting me every day? In fact, I'm not targeting you to scold you or criticize you. That's not what I'm doing. I am just teaching the Geshe Chikawa's teaching. So if you feel scolded, it's Geshe Chikawa that is scolding you. Sometimes when I read into such kind of mind trainings, I myself feel rather quite embarrassed myself, because I am not really able to complete all the actions. But I am giving this teaching as a blind who is leading a blind. But at least I have the lamp in my hand. So over here it talks about how or if you can control your anger. The next one is meditate constantly on those who've been set apart. over here, in fact, what it says is that there are the objects or the person who aggravates you the most. There are people who probably made really bad connection with you. You have share bad karmic connection, and then in such a way, you both feel quite resented towards each other. And or when you're facing the kind of objects who are your teachers, who are your parents, who've been really kind to you. So those are the group of people who then are the group of people who are the object of then serious, who are the serious types of objects, where then you should be very careful to be in front of them. Once you generate anger and aggression towards them, then you won't be able to receive beneficial fruition from this. The 13th one talks about don't be dependent on the external conditions. What does that mean? It means that during our practice, there are people who would only practice when the favorable conditions are gathered. But when there are the unfavorable conditions, such as illness, such as the bad weather, such as afflictions, such as bad environments, such as busy schedule, such as too many things on the agenda, such kinds of unfavorable conditions all arise, then you don't practice. When you eat well, when the weather is good, when your mood is good, when there's no pressure, and then you would practice. If you were this kind of practitioner, then any little bit of flickering of the external condition would interrupt your practice. A genuine practitioner, they would continuously to practice despite the external condition. Your meal, your health, your mood, and the weather. A good practitioner would not then consider any of these kind of conditions and continuously practice to engage in practice. So we should not then be disturbed by the external circumstances. In fact, in many of the biographies of masters, it is described that their practices were so much more difficult than what we encounter nowadays. Maybe you encounter many different kinds of difficulties nowadays, but as long as you have faith, as long as you still have freedom, have the favorable conditions, you still can you should then engage in practice and do not let the external circumstances to change your practice, to interrupt your practice. Otherwise, you won't be able to succeed in practice at all. And the next one is that this time practice was the most important. In fact, when we still have the opportunity, we should engage in practice. What's more important, practice for yourself or others? Practice for others. What's more important, bodhicitta or self-liberation? Is bodhicitta. So inside of practice, there are inside of Dharma, then there's analytical teachings or doctrines and practice. What is more important? It is practice that is more important. In terms of the teachings of in terms of practice, there's a pith instruction and general doctrine, which is more important than it is pith instruction. Many of the past great masters, they've given the teachings in the way, in the form of pith instructions, such as Trungpa and Atisha and so on. In fact, in this teaching, I think it is the complete manual for your practice. It has all the pith instructions in it for people who then want to engage in practice. This is quite enough, just as a driver who just need one manual in the car and it's sufficient.
但是呢，我们也可以就看看，就是你自己也看一看整个这个仙宗密宗的这些经论，就是这样。所以我们
If you were to then read into the esoteric as well as exoteric teachings, I think then you will know that this teaching has the essence of all of those teachings. So this is for sure the pith instruction. The next one says that don't twist or don't misunderstand. The first one, the first twist in practice is patient. There are people who endure lots of patience when they're watching TV shows. They can endure hunger. They can endure deprivation of sleep. But when it comes to Dharma, they cannot recite any of the verses from the Dharma. They cannot bear any of the difficulties in the practice of Dharma, but by endure things that's meaningless and not of any value in this world, they have lots of endurance. So that's the first twist, is that they have a twist in practice, a twist in patience. The second one is twist of yearning. When facing Dharma, they have no interest whatsoever. But when it comes to lots of the meaningless things of this world, they started having a lot of interest. So that's a twist of yearning. And the next one talks about excitement or a twist of interest. When it comes to the Dharma, they have no interest. But when it comes to the 5 desires and the 6 objects, then they have great longing, great excitement and interest to then for that. That is a twist in the interest. The next one is twist in compassion. When people view the practitioners who are engaging in the aesthetic Dharma practice, they feel lots of compassion towards them. Oh, the monastics, the renouncing is how poor they don't get to enjoy at all. And when it comes to the butchers or people who then are fettered by the karma, by the bad karma, and by their afflictions, when they were to view these kind of people, they don't feel such kind of compassion at all. Just as when Milarepa encountered a beautiful woman, the beautiful woman said that, wow, you, or poor thing, you practice in such aesthetic way, you don't even get to enjoy this world at all. And Milarepa said, oh no, I myself don't suffer, but you would suffer. You would suffer for in this continuously to suffer in samsara and don't feel such suffering. The next one, which is the 5th one, is that they have a twist of priority. There are people who have great capacity, they would pursue for success. And similarly, in the around lots of the great lamas, they are surrounded by many disciples who have a priority only for the worldly success, but not for Dharma. So that's a twist of priority. The next one is a twist of joy. That is then says when the other person is going through a rough course, and you would feel really happy about it. Just as during 9/11, lots of Chinese youth, they felt, wow, how wonderful. The United States are going through such terrorist attack. I think this is a very much perverted view of joy. In fact, this is a twisting practice of joy. There are people from the surface, they may seem to be very compassionate and very nice, but inside they have a malicious, they have quite a malicious mind. Sometimes they appear to hold a prayer wheel and their mala, they chant Om Mani Padme Hum, but inside their mind they have great hatred and aversion towards this one and towards that one. This kind of person is really, really twisted in their joy, in their mind. And the 16th one is that don't be inconsistent. During our practice, we should not be inconsistent. We practice today but not tomorrow. We practice after 2 days. What we should do, in fact, is that we should practice continuously, like a small stream that goes a long way. Some of the new practitioners, what they do is they would get up at 3 a.m. and started to practice. They don't even lie in the bed, they would sleep in the sitting posture so that they would get up early. In fact, what we should do is that we should have a consistent mind. We should have a steadfast kind of pace in terms of our Dharma practice. The greatest people in this world, what the common characteristic that they share is that they have a steadfast, a step-by-step kind of approach in terms of their practice. So we should also then practice, engage in the Dharma practice in such a way. The next one, it says, train wholeheartedly. Do not get too tight, do not get too loose. Do not only consistently practice in a short period of time. In fact, what you should do is to consistently, wholeheartedly to practice. I sometimes see lots of practitioners who were very enthusiastic a decade or 2 decades ago, and they are still very much dedicated and enthusiastic about the Dharma and do not lose their faith. That's quite important, such kind of devotion, such kind of wholeheartedness in terms of their practice. The 18th one says that gain freedom through discernment and analysis. So you should then discern and then analyze your affliction. You should then watch for the stage where you have a rather coarse affliction and the stage where you have subtle afflictions, and then work with such afflictions accordingly. The 19th one says that don't be boastful. In fact, this translation, I think the Tibetan version is a little bit different. The other version says, don't wallow in self-pity. That is more similar to it. In fact, I think in different editions, then it also says, don't be boastful. If it's boastful, then it means whenever you've done something that is beneficial, you should not praise yourself and should not be so boastful about your merits and the benefits that you've created for others. Do not boast your good qualities in front of others. And the other translation says, don't wallow in self-pity. What that means then is in your practice or in front of others, you should not blame others by saying that I've worked so hard. Why don't you pay attention to me? Why don't you understand me? Why don't you? You constantly then complain to others. You constantly then blame the others. But what you should do is that in your own action, it is your own aspiration, it is the thing that you yourself aspire to do. So at that moment, you should just engage in whatever you do. Do not blame the other people from misunderstanding, from any kind of discomfort that created to you. You should not hold such kind of mentality while doing the thing that you are doing, that you aspire to do. Then then you should avoid getting such kind of whining mentality. The next one says that don't be irritable. Do not get so irritated by others. When you are normally seen to be very polite and happy, but when there's something that triggers you, right away your anger rises and you started getting really irritated and very aggravated. So that's not a good kind of conduct that you should perform. There are nowadays lots of monastics who wears a beautiful red robe, but in front of other people, they would then started shouting, they started cursing. And then when you do that, of course, it's very difficult for other people to give rise to devotion and faith to the monastic group. This is quite irrational, quite unreasonable. For the lay practitioners, it is the same. The lay practitioner appears to be practitioners to others, but whenever there's something that aggravates you, right away you started jumping on your toes and you started pounding on the table and so on. This does not then create good kind of image for others to see the practitioners. Also, it leaves other people the kind of impression that you are very easily to be aggravated, and they will keep such an image for a long period of time. In Visar, there's a kind of non-human, where the citizens or the householders in that region, they say that such kind of non-human around Visar, they are really easy to get irritated. People could get very irritable very easily. Just something very simple. Maybe it could be nowadays, people have a rather very fragile mind. Some little irritation could cause great detrimental results. So do not create such kind of detrimental situation for others or yourself. The next one, it says, don't be temperamental. There are people nowadays who get very temperamental. They first to be very happy, and all of a sudden, the clear sky started gathering dark clouds, and a thunderstorm is approaching, just like the weather in spring. So temperamental is really not good when you are happy at one time and angry in a flick of fingers. The next one says that don't seek acknowledgement. There are people who would seek for fame and acknowledgement, good reputation, when what you pursue does not fit your own merit. In fact, this is quite a delusion. This is not something that you can keep for yourself. Do not keep your livelihood or build your livelihood up on such kind of fame. Nowadays, the worldly beings, they would pursue fame, but for practitioners who are Mahayana practitioners, they in fact don't take the fame very seriously. In the West, they feel that you are considered to be successful only when you're well known, when you have a good reputation. Therefore, it is quite important to build good reputation and to then promote yourself, and that's the only way to gain good reputation. In fact, in this world, if a country is selfish, if a country leader is selfish, if the citizens of country is selfish, then there's really no other way for the future of such kind of a society or such kind of a world. So we've talked about the 22 points of commitment and precepts. The next one it says that the essence of the nectar-like instructions for transforming into the path of awakening of the 5 prevalent signs of degeneration was passed down from the one from Golden Isle. When karmic seeds left over from former training were aroused in me, I felt great interest, and so in fact, other practices, there are practitioners who cannot transform the adversity into the path of enlightenment. When other people view adversity, they see adversity as great, solid obstacles. But as practitioners, what we see is those adversities are like the firewood to the fire that adds to the fire, or the oil to the fire that then would burn the fire of wisdom and the success even more blazingly. The next one is says that when karmic seeds left over from former training were aroused in me, I felt a great interest. And so, without regard for suffering or disparagement, I sought instructions on subduing ego clinging. Now, even in death, I shall have no regrets. So Geshe Chikawa, through his devotion, his aesthetic practice, he in fact received the teaching of eradicating the ego clinging. And upon receiving such teaching of the 7 points of training the mind, even if I, Chikawa, die tomorrow, I have no regret. In Luanyu, in the teaching of Confucius Analects, it has something very similar. Maybe during those teachings, I will then explain that from a different angle. So in this teaching, it has great valuable teachings about transforming the adversity into the path of enlightenment, and about the commitments and vows of practice, and about the importance of bodhicitta and the main practice of preliminaries, and the applying practice throughout one's whole life. So this is quite a supreme teaching, and I've used the last 2 days to give the teaching of the 7 points of training the mind. Therefore, I really hope those of you who've received this teaching to practice and adapt it as your life practice. And I will stop here.